Okay, um, let's open with a word of prayer this week. Father, just pray that you'll help us to use our time wisely, that we'll try to impart some wisdom and sense of the things that are going on in the world, and just pray that you'll use these words to touch people's hearts. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, this week, for many reasons, we're going to talk about shaking things up, because that's exactly what happened this week. Things got shook up, in case you weren't paying attention. It is an interesting time to be alive. I say this every week. The things that are happening in the world from a prophetic standpoint just seem to be converging and accelerating. Now, I know people will say the United States is not in Bible prophecy. Now, I happen to not agree with that. I don't have time this morning to go into the reasons for that. But right now, we are the world's superpower. And the events of Bible prophecy will unfold in a particular geopolitical context. So I can't say that, it's going to happen in the next year or the next 2 years or the next 3 months. But certainly, even with the events of the election in the United States this week, the overall state of the world is still in a state of some chaos. It appears that things have calmed down a little bit, but let me make a recommendation to you. I'm going to do some other things, talk about things going on today. Jack Hibbs gave a great talk at Chino Hills on Wednesday night about the night after the election that I think is really great, and you should go look it up at the Calvary Chapel Chino Hills website, calvarycch.org, calvarycch.org, and you can click on the media center and find what he talked about on Wednesday night, because I think it's highly relevant. And Jack's approach to the election was not so much we're voting for people, but we're voting for party platforms. And he had looked at the platforms, and he came up with 5 things in the Republican platform that were not in the Democratic platform. And now that I've said there are 5 things, I know I'm going to forget some. But there was, of course, the abortion issue. There was the relationship with Israel. There was traditional marriage, the value of work, and I can't remember the 5th one. And I don't even know if I got the 4th one correct. So but go look at his website, and you can find that out. There's also a pastor friend of mine who's talking on it today. His name is Brandon Holthouse at Soul Harbor Church in Bakersfield, California. You can probably find them online. I know his thing should be up tonight or tomorrow. He sent me his outline. It's very good, very well done. And I don't want to plow over the same ground that they do. But from a biblical standpoint, we know that God is involved in these things. So I'm going to make a couple of opening comments, and then we'll get kind of into discussing the details of what went on this week. This is something that concerns me. This is from, I don't remember which paper this morning. Might be it's from the Wall Street Journal the other day. Schools step up bid to curb opioid abuse. I live in Dublin, Ohio, which is a fairly affluent community. A lot of people want to live there, great schools and all that. We have a major problem in my community with opioid abuse, heroin addiction. I've now read statistics that more young people in the United States die from heroin overdoses than car accidents. This is a stunning thing. And I do think this has prophetic significance, because we know that in Revelation, it talks about the fact that there's coming some judgments, and one of them is drug abuse. In Revelation 9:20, it says, "And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues, yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone, and of wood, which neither can see nor hear nor walk. Neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts." And that's something that's predicted is going to come in the future. But here we live in by most measures, one of the most affluent societies on earth. And we have this problem with sorceries. The word there is pharmakia, which means the use of medicine, drugs. And so I do think this is something that relates to Bible prophecy, and it is a major problem in our culture, among other things. But the main verse for today is this passage in Daniel chapter 2 where Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and he's looking for somebody to interpret the dream. And he says, you tell me the dream and the interpretation, and I won't kill you. He puts a little pressure on the people that are supposed to do these things. And so Daniel comes and answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. He revealeth the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. So we know that regardless of what the result of the election would have been, regardless of what the result of the Brexit election in Europe, in Great Britain a few months ago, God is in control. And God raises up the kings that he wants and puts them in place. Now, some people will respond to that, well, then I don't have to do anything about it. But we live in a culture where you're allowed to vote, you're allowed to petition the government for a redress of grievances, you're allowed to speak out, you're allowed to speak against the king, and I don't see anything wrong with Christians doing that in a proper manner. It says in Romans 13 we're to be subject to the higher powers. Well, that doesn't mean you be quiet, because we have the ability to speak out in this country, at least for right now, and we should speak out, and we are allowed to oppose the government and try to vote in somebody else. And so Barack Obama was the king, I guess, the president that God raised up 8 years ago, and he's leaving. He really, folks, listen, he really is, I believe, leaving. There's tremendous hype out there about he's not leaving, he's going to declare martial law. Listen, the same people who are running around saying he was going to declare martial law were also saying what? He's going to cancel the elections. Did he cancel the elections? No. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So, calm down. Ultimately, God is in control, and there may be an oppressive king rise up. We may face horrible persecution like they face in Iraq or Syria on a daily basis. People getting their heads chopped off, people being tortured and killed for their faith in Jesus, and God is still in control. Remember what Mike Clapham said a while back. Don't be afraid of the devil. The worst thing he can do is kill you. You're supposed to fear he who can destroy both soul and body. The Lord, God. Satan can only kill you. And what happens when he kills you? We all have that hope that absent from the body, present with the Lord. Is that a bad thing? Do you really, really believe that? Now, look, we're all going to exit this life in different manners. Some of us will have heart attacks and we're gone. Some will suffer from cancer and we're gone. Some will be persecuted and killed for their faith. Others will be raptured. Ultimately, however we exit, our hope is to be with Christ. And ultimately, resurrected. Our bodies resurrected. So keep that in mind as we go through all of these things, because it's very easy when you see things seemingly spinning out of the control to get a little bit uptight. Don't. God's not given us the spirit of fear, but of what? Power. So keep that in mind. So shaking up, this just came in this morning. You should pray for the people in New Zealand. They had a 7.8 earthquake. I hear there have been some tsunami warnings issued. It hit, I believe, on the North Island near Christchurch. New Zealand, and I'm not sure, is that where they had the earthquake a number of years ago that was pretty powerful? I believe it was. So this is a very powerful earthquake. I hear that it's very chaotic in New Zealand right now. So there are a lot of believers there, people that listen to this, to things here at our church that are there. So keep them in prayer. If you feel led to contribute to relief efforts and that type of thing, that's a picture from Christchurch this morning. It's going to be a lot of damage. My understanding, too, is across the Pacific in Argentina, in South America, there was a 6.2 earthquake shortly thereafter. So it does say that earthquakes in diverse places will happen in the end times. And everybody tries to explain all of these things away. And at some point, you got to really say, can we really keep trying to explain all these things away? So we had an election this week. Is there anybody that didn't know we have an election? Pastor Steve will be providing counseling for you after to help out. So we started off the week. Last Monday, the FBI came out, maybe it was on Sunday, said, we're not going to pursue any charges against Hillary Clinton. Remember a week or so before, they had issued a letter that they were looking into things again. They went through 650,000 emails that they'd found on the Wiener home computer. And it is, folks, I work with data like this in my job as a trial lawyer. It is possible to review 650,000 emails, at least at a high level, within that period of time. It's not, I don't think there's any conspiracy or anything like that in the way that was done. One of the things you do is you go through and you get rid of all the duplicates. And if you've ever looked into the trash in your email, and I mean the trash folder in your email, not just the trash that comes into your email, but the trash in the trash, you'll find a lot of duplicates. And so what you do is it's called deduping, and you're able to do word searches and look at the metadata, and you're able to get rid of all the duplicate emails. So they would have known all the emails that they looked at before. They ran a deduping program, and they got a universe that they felt that they could review. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. So the projections were, uncertainty, but virtually every single media outlet, save a few outliers like a professor in New York or someplace who said Trump was going to win, everybody said Hillary Clinton was a lock. They issued maps like this that showed projections, and Hillary Clinton was going to, she had a, let's see, I think I have a slide here. She had a 90% chance of winning. 92%. Trump was 91.2%. Trump was 8.8%. Everybody was sure Florida and North Carolina were the real toss-ups. Everything else was pretty much a lock. Maybe some questions about Colorado, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, maybe New Hampshire. But, everything was pretty much, it was going to be a Hillary Clinton landslide. And I don't know if you're like me, I was going to go to bed because I had a trial this week and I was very busy, and I couldn't go to bed. It's just not, because if I go to bed, I'm going to be laying there with my phone, watching TV on my phone. So my wife, she said, I'm going to bed, and I went up, a few hours later, and her phone was laying there on the nightstand blaring, she was watching TV up there too. She'd fallen asleep though, so. So here's a little clip from Fox, and I'm going to play this, but you see on the left is the New York, in fact, the New York Times had one of the more accurate websites of projecting things. Once things started coming in, they were pretty accurate. They were ahead of the curve. They were certainly ahead of the networks. And you can see over time, on the left, it starts about 7 o'clock, and you see Hillary's up there about 85%. She actually went up to about almost 90%. As the election returns came in, Trump started down here very low. and you see that about 10 p.m. they crossed. Then it's a 50-50 deal, and Trump's chances went up. So as this was coming in, this was the discussion on Fox News.
I think we're all, at least I'm coming to the conclusion tonight, conclusion's the wrong word, to open to the possibility Donald Trump could be the next president of the United States. The crowd. I just said it's a possibility. They're cheering on it. No, look, Florida, I believed as we sat down here at 6 o'clock tonight that Hillary Clinton was going to take it. I think a lot of us bought into the idea the Hispanics were going to be the difference, big surge. Now we're counting votes. I mean, now we're down to single votes. This could go either way. North Carolina could go either way. Ohio could go either way. New Hampshire could go either way. Look, I think you'd still rather be in Clinton's position than Trump's as we sit here right now. But you can certainly write a scenario. He has not lost any state that he must have. He's competitive and within the margin of error in a lot of states that I think we thought she was going to put away. He could be our next president.
And so, you know, it was very, I know people will judge me for this, but I watched MSNBC because it was very entertaining. You know, to kind of watch, you know, intelligent people. They've been to college and they live in nice places in New York and make a lot more money than us, and they're all like, what's going on? And then James Carville came on. I think he was on CNN, and he was like, I mean, you can almost see the skin starting to peel off his head to reveal his inner self. And he was talking about something about losing big as an optimistic term at this point or something like that for Hillary Clinton. He was like, and he just didn't know what to say. I mean, he was really, but it was really, I'm a sinner. I enjoyed it. And if I could find the tape of it or the recording of it, I'd play it for you so you could enjoy it. But I just couldn't find it in a good enough quality. But you can find it out there. He was really beside himself. And so all of a sudden, things changed, and the results started coming in. The map changed. Trump won all these important states. The only one he didn't get was New Hampshire. But they weren't even calling Minnesota, for crying out loud, till late in the evening. And now listen, they delayed calling Ohio as long as possible. I never thought Ohio was going to be close. I've been all over the states of Ohio and Indiana over the last, 2 months. And I'm telling you, the ratio of Trump to Clinton signs at least was 1,000 to 1. I'm sure that's the only place. There's like enclave in Old Worthington that we really need to bathe in prayer for those people. I mean, because there are a bunch of Clinton signed. Well, there were. I don't know where they are now. But it was unbelievable. I mean, in the world, the Wall Street Journal headline, "A New Political Order." Because it changed. It wasn't just Trump. It was the Republicans keeping a pretty good majority in the House. They kept the Senate. And everybody said they're not going to keep the House. They're not going to keep the Senate. There's a big party going on. And you can see, and I'll play you a clip here, the headline there in the New York Times. So here is this epic, historic, unprecedented, unpredicted win for Donald Trump. And what is the headline in the New York Times on Thursday when they, because they couldn't get it out on Wednesday? What was their headline? Epic win, a new political, no, it was Democrats, students, and foreign allies face the reality of a Trump presidency. I've never seen the media in the tank. By the way, the New York Times has issued a letter saying, we really did kind of go in the tank for Trump, and we need to watch that and all that stuff. And listen, I like the New York Times. I know their orientation. It is an important newspaper of record. I look at it every day, as painful as it is. I know I read it so you don't have to, but I'm just telling you, I enjoy the New York Times just because it is entertaining sometimes how out of touch people like Frank Brunei and Paul Krugman are. You know, and Krugman, he gets the Nobel Prize for economics. What did he say? Everything's going to fall apart economically because Donald Trump won. And what was it? The next day they had an all-time high on the Dow. The futures were way down. Financial guys don't like uncertainty, okay? But then they dealt with it, and you know they kind of priced it into the markets and everything. The Boston Herald talked about aftershock, people just screaming. Here's the map. The blue is Hillary, the red and light red is Trump. And here's one thing that I found interesting. I tried to find a final map, a final vote total. It is virtually impossible. I'm pretty good with the internet. I could not find one that really had Michigan red, you know, in the vote. And I can't find the vote total. It's up in the air. I've seen anything from a 200,000 vote Hillary Clinton lead in the popular vote to 500,000 vote Trump lead. It's irrelevant though because we use the Electoral College, and I'll talk more about that. And let's see. Here's a summary of the predictions of the experts from just the day before.
Tomorrow night, I think when Hillary Clinton wins, that Donald Trump will have lost this election from the very first day he announced and took off after Mexicans.
Classic Trump. I think you have to view last night's debate as Donald Trump's concession speech. He realizes he can't win.
He had no chance, in my view, and the numbers are going to bear that out tomorrow.
Well, I can't find a single Republican who now thinks they're going to win.
You can't go into a general election with only 25% of the Republican base behind you and expect to win in a general. You just can't.
That's an awfully difficult lead to make up. It really is at this point, particularly when Trump's negatives remain in the 60s, which is just almost unprecedented.
We may lose by historic proportions.
It's just that he knows he can't win, so why not?
No. I think Donald Trump has fooled himself into looking at his crowds and the rallies and the size, and he thinks that's America.
He had no chance to win doing what he was doing and with the Latino community feeling so targeted from the very first day he announced.
This guy isn't a Republican. He can't beat Hillary Clinton.
Wrong.
Okay. So, that's a pretty good summary. Please, let's be balanced and fair here. In Europe, everybody was like, oh, the world waits, what's going on? Trump moves to reassure shocked allies and nervous investors. Hillary Clinton was nowhere to be seen. Here's how the markets reacted initially. And you can see they dropped way down. It was crazy. I mean, even non-economic people were going, oh, look at the future, the Dow futures, like they actually know what that is. And they were way down. They were down 800 or 900 points, which is pretty significant. But then, you know, by the next afternoon, all-time high for the Dow. So crazy night. Here's these election results. Here's some of the results. Of course, I mentioned to you the New York Times headlines. Democrats, students, and foreign allies. Oh my goodness, they're falling apart. Alexander Petrie wrote an article, The 5 Stages of Trump Grief. Thomas Friedman, we're near the breaking point. Gail Collins in the New York Times, 10 steps for Trump trauma. Colleges were canceling classes, canceling exams, having pizza parties, bringing in therapy dogs. One thing makes you not optimistic about the future, it's that kind of nonsense. A friend of mine, you can probably find it on my timeline because I shared his post on Facebook. He said, in 2008, I was distraught. I was upset. I was depressed that Clinton had won. So the next day, I got up and I went to work. I mean, we have a major problem that this is such a problem. Here's sort of a great graphic of the free fall of the media. And then this is pretty good for Morning Joe the other morning. I think Joe Scarborough, Mika Brzezinski, and Halperin. Is it Doug Halperin? I think are talking about this. Let's just listen to a minute of that.
It's how I gauge.
It's not just the New York Times.
I agree, but
I love the Washington Post.
No, but look
at the headline.
Look at the headline of this
story.
Look at the headline of this story. This is the day after.
Look at it.
A surprising underdog sweeping victory, and their headline is not "Disaffected Americans have a champion going to the White House," or "The country votes for fundamental change." The headline's about how disappointed the friends of the people who run the New York Times are about what's happened. I mean, it's amazing.
Democrats, students,
it's amazing
and
to me that this
allies
is the headline of the New York Times.
Face the reality of
and
Trump.
Not picking on the Times, but it's a great example.
Look at this. Look at this.
Right.
This is staggering. It really is. Mark,
I mean,
it's the onion. This shows that the editors of the New York Times, who I have the greatest respect for them, they don't get it. This is actually
about them.
A Saturday Night Live skit. You went to a cocktail party the night before, and you decided to write this.
When I thought Trump had a chance to lose, which I did, but I thought he had a chance to win it, I said to liberals, he's going to get 42 million votes. 42 million people are going to vote for him. What are they voting for? And this is their headline.
That's their newsroom.
If a Democratic candidate who was thought to, it said had a 10% chance of winning by the New York Times, had ended up winning red states as Trump won blue states, I don't think that would have been the headline.
No.
And I'll just say again, the responsibility of journalists is to not report on their biases. It's to go out and understand the country through the prism of the election and say, why are people feeling the way they're feeling? And I'm just stunned at how people are reacting.
By the way,
liberal
look
filmmaker.
at this. Let's talk about
Except
some
I'm not
people
stunned.
who did it right. The Boston
again.
Globe.
There
They
you
did
go.
it right. It was a seismic shift. Now listen, we're all saying that we thought Trump could have won. We're just as shocked as you that he won the way he did. So nobody's sitting here saying we had a crystal ball. But the thing is, understand, across divide, the Washington Post writes, all eyes on Trump.
Can I just say one more thing?
And I just want to say, the Wall Street Journal had, I think, probably the best headline: a new political order.
And it continued. Now I'm going to play a clip from Dennis Prager the day after. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. I know he did an event during the election over at Chino Hills, Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills. And here was his comment, I think it's about 4 minutes, on Wednesday during the first hour of his show.
I'm happy about the result for which I worked so very, very hard. But truly my primary reaction last night and today is relief. 4 more years of left-wing control of this country. I said it before, and it was a risk saying this, because you are in effect saying it's a dim future for this country that I so revere and love. And people can get dispirited. But I didn't mince my words. If she won, if any Democrat won, and I kept saying that over and over, then our country would be very, very troubled. Much more so than even today. As Victor Davis Hanson wrote in a piece, and I quoted in my final piece yesterday, a final plea to never-Trumpers. The Supreme Court, Obamacare, the debt, rebuilding the military, the Second Amendment, school choice, abortion, reforming the tax code, reforming regulation, energy exploration and production, illegal immigration, sanctuary cities, and so many other issues. He wrote the Republican ticket is the antithesis of Clinton-Kaine and is recognized as such by nearly all progressives. The victory of Donald Trump is historic. Everyone acknowledges that. The defeat last night for unfortunately dark forces in America is so great that it's almost difficult to fully assimilate into one's consciousness. The repudiation of the United States of America of the 8 tragic, destructive years of Barack Obama, that alone. There's a Hebrew prayer that most Jews know. It's called Dayenu. It's sung on the Passover Seder. It means, if only that, it would be enough. If it were only a repudiation of what Barack Obama has done to this country, not to this country, Dayenu. If it was only a repudiation of the media, an utter contempt. You were an adjunct of the Democratic Party. You didn't even act neutral. You didn't even feign objectivity. You didn't even claim that we will give you the truth. We will give you a democratic victory. The utter repudiation of you, the contempt with which you in the media overwhelmingly are held, Dayenu, that would suffice. To win a campaign for President of the United States without special interest money, Dayenu. To win the presidential campaign spending so much less money than normally is expected, Dayenu. To win a presidential campaign without a ground campaign, without people busing people to polls and told what number, what letter to punch in, Dayenu. I mean, I could just those alone, and then the list that I gave, the judges that would have been appointed and who will now not be appointed, Dayenu. And here's a word to some dear, and I mean dear, Republicans. It's very important for some of you to do some serious introspection and perhaps a pursuit of a little humility. When you claimed with utter and total certitude that he will bring down the Republican Party, that a Trump nomination will mean the loss of the Senate, perhaps the loss of the House, perhaps the loss of more governorships. They're up, the Republicans, in governorships. 33 of 50 governors of this country are Republicans. The victory is staggering. So those of you who predicted he will bring everybody down, your read on America was wrong. Really, really, really wrong.
Well, there you go. Good comments. Look, I know people don't have a lot of extra money. You can podcast Dennis without any, and I don't get anything for this. You can podcast Dennis without any commercials. Download them, listen to them at your convenience, listen to them at double speed, so you can do it in half the time, which is what I try to do. And it's like $54 a year, $54 a year. So it's relatively about $1 a week. Here's a chart that I found that sort of supports him. I think this is from, you see the change in the Democratic since 2008? Down 10% in the Senate, House 20%, state legislatures 20%, governors 35%. Very successful presidency, wasn't it? Not. So here, listen, I have to do this because, one more time. Okay, so here, there's something significant she said in her concession speech. So here it is.
Last night, I congratulated Donald Trump and offered to work with him on behalf of our country. I hope that he will be a successful president for all Americans. This is not the outcome we wanted or we worked so hard for. We have seen that our nation is more deeply divided than we thought. But I still believe in America, and I always will. And if you do, then we must accept this result and then look to the future. Donald Trump is going to be our president. We owe him an open mind and the chance to lead. Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power. And we don't just respect that, we cherish it. It also enshrines other things: the rule of law, the principle that we are all equal in rights and dignity, freedom of worship and expression. We respect and cherish these values too, and we must defend them.
Now, the reason why I say that is she mentioned freedom of worship. That is not in the Constitution, but that is what the left is interpreting the First Amendment to say, so that you don't have the right to freedom of religious expression, to live out your faith in the public square, in the workplace. You're supposed to go do that in private, while they promote their leftist religion. It's in the Bill of Rights. Establishment of religion is prohibited, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. There's no such thing as freedom of worship. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And this was a very traumatic loss. There were, look, I would have been upset if she had won. I don't know that I'd be asking for a therapy dog when Graders is right down the street, right? Or go up to Powell, you got Jenny's, Graders, and Handles like within a quarter mile. And so just test them all out and get yourself into a diabetic coma or something. So, there's University of Michigan offered its traumatized students coloring books and Play-Doh to calm them. We're going to kill them in a couple weeks, I hope. University of Kansas reminded its stressed-out kids that therapy dogs were available. Cornell University held a campus-wide cry-in with officials handing out tissues and hot chocolate. Tufts University offered its devastated students arts and crafts. There was a book review in the Wall Street Journal this week. What's happened to the university? A sociological explanation of its infantilization. Boy, is that ever a timely thing. Obama came out, no Obama clip, okay. I'm sure there'll be one before he gets, we got 70 days or so to go. He did give a little talk to the White House staffers who watched on with very happy faces. Or like, you mean I actually got to go get a real job, like maybe in the world? And I could show you a bunch of pictures of that. Here's Rachel Maddow. She was a little upset. Here's what she had to say.
You're awake, by the way. You're not having a terrible, terrible dream. Also, you're not dead and you haven't gone to hell. This is your life now. This is our election now. This is us. This is our country. It's real.
And she was pretty upset. I mean, like I say, entertainment factor, it's okay to watch that. Of course, there were protests all over the place. They had a really large one in Los Angeles yesterday. I mean, easily over a couple 100,000 people, I would guess. It brings back memories, though, of a former governor of California who dealt with protests back in the 60s. And here's a couple of his comments that he had to say.
They were going to physically destroy the university. Now, why did you
negotiate many times?
Negotiate? What is to negotiate? What is?
Well, the university is a public institution.
That's
it's
right.
An important institution
but the university,
for all of its own community, and for the community of Berkeley that live around it.
All of it began the first time some of you who know better and are old enough to know better let young people think that they had the right to choose the laws they would obey as long as they were doing it in the name of social protest.
There are cities in Michigan. Oh, shut up.
At the Huffington Post, they talk about the Mike Pence assault on LGBTQ equality is already underway. As I've written over and over throughout this election campaign, as the media had bizarrely and irresponsibly portrayed Trump as more accepting on gay issues, Trump met with religious extremists and made promises to them. He promised he would put justice on the Supreme Court to overturn marriage equality, and the list of 20 candidates he has offered certainly fit the bill, which he's consistently opposed himself since 2000. He promised that he would sign the First Amendment Defense Act, which would allow for discrimination against LGBT people by government employees and others. Mike Pence, as Dominic Holden at BuzzFeed points out, has already stated that he and Trump plan to withdraw federal guidance to the states issued by the Obama administration protecting transgender students. And they're upset. What's the phrase? Their panties are in a wad or a bunch. And they're afraid. Here's Krauthammer, who didn't even vote for Trump, his assessment of Obama's legacy.
Obama's legacy is toast. Obama's legacy is gone, which explains why he's so desperately and unusually in American history campaigned so roughly against Donald Trump. And I think he's going to end up as a parenthesis in American history in the sense that he thought, when he came into office, he thought he was the Ronald Reagan of the left, meaning Reagan came in, he changed the ideological trajectory of the country, he turned it into a conservative country where that was sort of the underlying consensus. Obama thought he was going to change all that and begin a liberal ascendancy the way that Reagan began a conservative ascendancy. Well, it did not turn out that way. The country rejected his policies.
Big time. So the DNC's regrouping. The word is this morning from the Los Angeles Times that Muslim Congressman Keith Ellison from Minnesota may be selected as the chairman of the Democratic Party. The head of CARE, by the way, one of the heads of CARE in the United States, tweeted out about, overthrow the regime. He put it in, it was a English alliteration of the Arabic. So people ran into Arabic and found out what he meant was overthrow the regime. Now he's just, I was just using political satire. Yeah. And I've got a pyramid in Egypt for sale, too. So Trump and Obama met, and, this is disconcerting, because we don't like, but look, I personally was encouraged by this. There's a lot of work to do. Here's a chart from today's Washington Post. All those little dots are jobs that need to be fulfilled. The red ones are ones that have to be approved by Congress, about 1,270. There's about 4,000 political appointee jobs that can be done. And if you don't think there's a lot of people that work at the White House, that's from the day when Obama talked the other day. They got all the staff together. I don't know if they've got the crying towels after or they've already used them. I don't know. But that's on the White House lawn. And look, here's some of the jobs like 1,270 presidential appointees. 363 don't need Senate approval. There's about 4,000 people. And I have to tell you, I'm a guy, I agree with Dennis Prager when he says that you'll be much happier in life if you have low expectations. So Maybe that's why my wife is happy, because she had low expectations, you know. And I see husbands and wives touching each other out there. You know what's going on in your house, and you'll be happier. So I have low expectations. You know, I think there are problems with Mr. Trump. I don't think he's the second coming or anything like that. I think we need to hold his feet to the fire, hold him accountable. But I must admit, I'm kind of encouraged with what I mean, so the election goes till it's like about 3 o'clock in the morning when he comes out and announces that he's won. He's got a concession call from Hillary Clinton. And, you know, I'm sure he went and got some sleep. I mean, he's the oldest man. He's older than Ronald Reagan was when Reagan was elected president. He's the oldest man ever elected president in the United States. And the campaign schedule that he pulled off was just absolutely stunning. I mean, the big rallies and flying all over and 5, 6, 7, 8 stops a day. I mean, I'm impressed. And so and a couple days later, they're having all these meetings at the White House or around. They've got people in place. They're gonna pick people, the politicos that know things that happen and stuff, because he's got to set up a government. So he's going to go to people who know, you know, where the paper clips are, where they keep the toilet paper and stuff like that. So I'm not troubled by that. You know, some of them, I'm sure I'm not going to be happy with some of the things he's done. He's going to bring people in that we just don't like. And it's just, you know, he's a politician, and that's going to happen. But I'm very impressed with the steps that he's taken thus far. I mean, he's got this, I mean, you see the 100 things, the things he wants to do in the first 100 days? It's a pretty impressive list. It's like, when did he do all this? When he's out there flying around, running to all these rallies and stuff. Yeah, almost like he's run a business before, okay? It's just a wild guess. And I will say this, I've talked to some friends who are interviewing, and people for whom I have tremendous respect are in discussions about possible positions. I can't say who they are, and so don't try to guess and don't ask me because I won't tell you. But I'm impressed. I'm impressed that a guy like Clint Blackwell is doing the domestic stuff. Mike Pence, an evangelical Christian, is heading up the transition. I mean, I'm happy with that. Okay, so sue me, I guess. You better bring your best game, because I had a trial this week, so I'm ready for you this week. Okay, the Electoral College. So we have a lot of people listen in Great Britain and Wales and Scotland, and they're like, where's this college at? And to be honest with you, with the questions that are people asking, so I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain things and calm everybody down. Okay, so there's the popular vote, and then there are people who are electors. Here's an elector from the state of Louisiana. The state of Louisiana electors signed this back in the time of Rutherford B. Hayes, and they voted. That's how we run things. There's an electoral map. Each state gets the number of people in Congress and the House and the Senate for their electoral votes. So there's 435 in Congress. You give 3 to the District of Columbia, 435 for House of Representatives, 100 for the Senate, 538 total. You have to get 270 to win. Currently, the talk is, at least the way, this is a projected map. And so for Hillary to win, and so the electors in about half the states are bound in some fashion to follow the popular vote in their state. There have been, I don't know, maybe 100 or so that have not followed that in American history in 237 elections. 57 elections, I'm sorry. And so it happens. There are outliers. This is about maybe the 4th time that the person who may not have won the popular vote wins the Electoral College and becomes president. It's the way we did it. I think the founders, whatever reason they set this up for, they were geniuses. Because if they didn't, we would have had Al Gore in 2000 and Hillary Clinton today. And anybody really want that? So, and because it evens out, and so a populous state like California, they can have, it can be 3 million to 0, you're still only going to get 55 electoral votes. So they all meet on December 19th, they will vote, and then those will be opened at the first session of Congress and counted. And so in early January is when the official declaration will be that Donald Trump has won the presidency. So now everybody's running around, upset, concerned, not really understanding the Electoral College. That's just the way it works. These people are party loyalists. There's a slate of Republican electors. There's a slate of Democratic electors. That's who you're really voting for when you vote for president. They're party loyalists, and everybody says, well, they're going to flip the vote. There's a change.org petition. I don't care if there's a change.org petition, okay? Go make up your own change.org petition to shut down change.org or something like that. It'd be as valid. It has no weight at all. So I personally, look, I suppose, and I know it's a crazy world, I'm not that concerned about it. I'm concerned that people are that concerned about it and losing sleep over it. Just relax and calm down. For Hillary, for this to be successful, they would have to flip 38 electors. Now, if about half of those are off the table, that means you got to get like 25% of the remaining electors to flip. That has never happened in American history. I don't think it's going to happen now. And you're going to hear, they're paying people to flip. Look, if you know of people getting paid to flip, go to the FBI, because that is a felony, a very serious felony, and it should be investigated. So here we go. So this is like 2016. This was the day before map. This was, and it didn't turn out that way. It really didn't turn out that way. Hillary was going to win with 323. She got about 100 less than that. This is about as close as a map that I could find as to the final results. And I've spent a lot of time looking. So listen, Electoral College, pretty much a lock, in my opinion. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And we'll have really big problems if that happens, trust me. And we don't want that to happen. The other issue that keeps coming up is he going to pardon Hillary? And the answer is this. Here's how a presidential pardon works. The power to pardon is absolute. There is nothing you can do to stop Obama from pardoning or granting clemency to anyone. Let me repeat that. There is nothing you can do to stop it. Every Republican president, every Democratic president, every president has had that power. It can apply to all past acts, depending on how they draft it. Charge or conviction is not necessary. I must have answered that question 100 times this week. And I apologize, I got a little testy with the 99th and 100th people that, I've really answered that 100 times. You do not need a charge or conviction. Drill that into your head. You don't have to be charged with a crime. Example, the pardon that I showed you right here. Gerald Ford pardoning Richard Nixon. Nixon was never charged with a crime, and he was pardoned. Now, there are a bunch of people that were in his administration that were charged and convicted. It only applies to federal crimes. So if they have Hillary and other people on state law violations, they can prosecute till their heart's content. Obama could not do anything about that. And if she had been elected, he could pardon her, but he couldn't prevent her from being impeached. That's the exception to the presidential pardon power. It can't apply to future acts or crimes. That would be ridiculous. And most probably, it could not be reversed by the new president when he comes in. There have been some attempts in the past, and they've kind of come up with this delivery. It wasn't delivered to the person being pardoned. Frankly, I don't think the courts, if Trump came in, he pardons Hillary and Trump comes in and undoes it, I just don't think, I think there's some issues that rise constitutionally with, I just don't think it's going to happen. And I don't think he can do it. So The left will push on things, though. Here's an example. The mayor of New York, a leftist, says that the database of undocumented New Yorkers could be deleted. A database containing the identity of undocumented immigrants living in New York City would not be opened up to a Trump administration without a real fight, the city's mayor said on Thursday. Because they want to be a sanctuary city. They don't care what the law is. They're scofflaws. De Blasio, speaking in a news conference the day after President-elect Donald Trump's stunning electoral victory, also left open the possibility that the database, which holds up personal information from the more than 850,000 New Yorkers who have a city municipal identification card, could be scrubbed. Here's what he said.
A lot of ways that we can keep our values as the governing spirit. Now, there are other areas, and I mentioned some of them, that cause tremendous concern. We, for example, believe fundamentally in respecting the rights of all New Yorkers, including those who are undocumented. Right now, even with some federal laws that we don't agree with, we're still able to assert our rights as a locality to do that. And so all of this has to play out, but I want New Yorkers to know we have a lot of tools at our disposal. We're going to use them. And we're not going to take anything lying down. I think that's the central point. Anything we see as a threat to New Yorkers, we will confront. Donald Trump's not changing the Constitution. He can change some federal laws, but the Constitution protects a lot of the rights and powers of localities. That's how it was built. So on something like that, I think because it touches that button directly of whether people's personal privacy is going to be respected, I think that's one where there would be a real fight.
I mean, this is the definition of irony. A Democrat leftist arguing in favor of states' rights. I mean, there is a warp in the time-space, the fabric of the time-space continuum when you see stuff like this happen. It's so he says, you know, we're not going to do it. The other thing that's important, article that there's a rightward tilt to the Supreme Court, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if she's true to her word, she may fly, fly, fly away. So the slide of the week. That's my opinion. So and this may be true. Now listen, abortion's not going to stop. It's a very long, involved process. At best, what you're going to do is you're going to get it sent back to the states, in which you're going to have a political fight at every state level. And it may or may not pass. You just need to understand that. So, you know, listen. Do not, church, get complacent. De Blasio is not going away. Everybody that voted for Hillary Clinton, all the students going to cry-ins and petting therapy dogs are not going away. You can see their change.org petitions and all this stuff. They're going to disrupt the inauguration and all this. We're going to have chaos in the streets. And, you know, look, I've seen the protests. They are a little bit violent. But, everybody says, well, he's going to institute martial law. Folks, personally think we're way a ways from that. I mean, a lot of us here, we grew up in the 60s. Is what you saw over the last couple of days anything compared to what happened in cities all across America, on college campuses all across America in the 60s? It's not even remotely comparable. Hundreds and hundreds of people died, remember? Cities burned. I was 11 years old. We took that, Midwest family vacation, 6 people in a Chrysler with no air conditioning in August, drive to California and get, mad at each other because you're hot in there. And we arrived in California in the middle of what? The Watts riots in 1965 in Southern California. We saw people shooting on the streets and stuff like that. So it's not there yet, okay? So I'm not that concerned about it. Even in Seoul, there are hundreds of protesters out there because of government corruption. In Europe, the reaction, Merkel's now the liberal West's last defender. What does that tell you? The liberal West is in a heap of trouble if she's the last defender. Germany's about gone. Now, I know they're trying to reconstitute a European army and all this thing. It's going to take a good while. They're not producing children. They're bringing in children that have values that are separate from theirs. They have a major problem. And this does have, we can talk about it later, some prophetic implications. Melanie Phillips has a great article in the Jerusalem Post. Jerusalem Post, Friday, November 11th. A bunch of great articles. Melanie Phillips, The Uprising of the Scorn. She compared it to Brexit. After Brexit, liberals claimed that the people hadn't understood what they were voting for. The implications were said to be too difficult for them to understand because they were merely xenophobic, anti-immigrant, uneducated troglodytes. And there are some. There really are. On both sides of this political spectrum we have here in the United States. But there aren't 50 million of them. Or 51 million, like, voted for both parties. Here's a clip. This is from Australian TV talking about the election.
Well, what that shows you is that the people in real America, in small-town America, weren't buying the bull dust that was coming out of the elites about voting
about the idea of there being a real America.
I'm sorry, I was speaking.
All America
is
real.
Is it
okay and the question, I believe, was to me. All of America is real. If you live in the city or you live in a small town, you're still an American.
This is the reason why Donald Trump won, because people like you lecture and hector people.
Pricey.
Steve,
we were talking to Jamila, and you don't need to keep that tone.
What you couldn't hear at the end, the ladies going, oh, no, we don't need to use that tone with her. You mean, and so I titled this one, This is How to Melt a Snowflake in One Sentence. 6 words or whatever it was. To the same kind of liberals, Melanie Phillips writes, Trump's victory presages the termination of decent life in America. He has been painted as a racist, misogynistic, anti-Semite on account of remarks which have been mostly misquoted, exaggerated, distorted, or taken out of context, or attitudes attributed to him through guilt by association. That is absolutely true. Thank you for saying that, Melanie Phillips. Go read that article. Another article, What's Next for the U.S.-Israel Relationship? I have 2 of these, and then we're going to be out of here. Today, as the voting comes to a close, so will the frostiest U.S.-Israel relationship in decades. The past 8 years have marked memorably low moments between the 2 nations' leaders, including the 2010 White House dinner snub, President Barack Obama and French President Nicolas Sarkozy's hot mic slander, and of course the anonymous administration official who referred to Israel's prime minister as a, you know what, in the Atlantic. What can be fixed? Here's his solutions. I can't remember who wrote this. No more daylight. In a meeting with Jewish leaders, Obama was quoted as saying, for 8 years during the Bush administration, there was no light between the United States and Israel, and nothing got accomplished. Over the next 2 terms, the president did little to hide those differences. In fact, there were times when his disdain was blaring. Consider Netanyahu's re-election in 2013. It took Obama an entire week to call Netanyahu to congratulate him. By contrast, it only took hours for him to call the Muslim Brotherhood candidate and then Egyptian President-elect Mohamed Morsi on winning his election. He was also quicker to call Russian President Vladimir Putin in 2012, despite rumors that the Russian vote was rigged. As one Washington Post columnist and Middle East expert put it, Netanyahu is being treated by Obama as if he were an unsavory third world dictator. If Obama hoped daylight would somehow move along the peace process, his 8 years in office proved the opposite. Unlike his predecessors who brokered Oslo and the Gaza disengagement, Obama's alienation of Israel yielded a stagnant peace process and an Israeli and Arab public increasingly weary of him. Goes on to mention his little talk that he gave in 2009 at Al-Azhar University, the seat of Muslim Sunni theology in the world, inviting in, over the objection of the then Egyptian dictator Mubarak, inviting in and insisting that prominent places in the audience be given to members of the banned Muslim Brotherhood. Call out the enemy as a solution. In the 2009 Cairo speech, Obama formally laid out his outreach mission to the Muslim world. While the feel-good address recognized important contributions made by Muslims in the arts and sciences and philosophy, it missed the opportunity to mention an enemy common to the West and Muslim world, radical Islam. I think this is going to change with President-elect Trump. Dubbed the new beginning, this conciliatory approach would define the rest of his presidency's war on terrorism. Obama was too often wrapped up in anti-war dreams to acknowledge the nightmare of perilous Islamic ideology raging across the Middle East. Perhaps the apex of the administration's reluctance to articulate what or who was fighting was Secretary of State John Kerry's comments after Charlie Hebdo attacks in France. And remember, they went into a Jewish delicatessen. And here's what Kerry said at the time. Oops.
There's something different about what happened from Charlie Hebdo, and I think everybody would feel that. There was a sort of particularized focus and perhaps even a legitimacy in terms of, not a legitimacy, but a rationale that you could attach yourself to somehow and say, okay, they're really angry because of this or that.
Yeah. By the way, he's going to. So, farewell. Loretta Lynch is leaving. I mean, there are some good things going to happen. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, a lot of the celebrities, by the way, Barbara Streisand's estate in Malibu probably could be had probably between $60 and $100 million. Maybe she'll donate it for a church camp or something. Who knows? And so Kerry's tried walking back the comments, but what emerged from the remarks was an administration either too misguided to understand what was behind all the Paris attacks, or worse, one that was too apprehensive to articulate the truth. And we know from Phil Haney what happened to him at the Homeland Security. He was forced to delete all these records that he put in about tying everything together. It wasn't just ignoring the problem, it was actively undermining the people who were investigating it. Another good article, The Middle East According to Trump. I don't have time to go into that. Michael Flynn, looks like he's going to maybe be Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who's very bold in speaking out about this. Looks like he's going to be National Security Advisor. And he's been on the campaign trail. He's a good guy. Also, a great article, Syria's Interlocking Conflicts. It's a good analysis to show how complex Syria is. So if Donald Trump doesn't have a handle on what's going on in Syria, the answer is Syria and Iraq. The answer is there may not be an answer. And this chaos that's been created over there and is underway does have, because of where it's located, does have prophetic implications because of the involvement of Iran and Russia and Turkey and all these major players in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia. And what's going to happen? I mean, it is chaotic. This is concerning to me. Trump-Israeli-Palestinian deal would be the ultimate deal. Peace would be the ultimate deal. Anybody in public life is going to be pushing for this, I think, unless somebody gets a hold of them and advises them, beware the revenge of Obama. I know that the Trump administration, people involved inside the Trump transition team, have already reached out to the Barack Obama White House and said, don't you dare go into the UN and try to do something that we're going to have to undo in a couple months. So, by the way, you think Jeb Bush would have done that? I mean, really, come on. Do you think the guy down there at Broad and High would have done it? The guy who wouldn't even be able, he couldn't vote for anybody. He's going to stand up to Obama and tell him what's going to happen. It's an embarrassment. Somebody said that. It is an embarrassment. And never forget. And listen, Portman ran a great campaign, but he's a big wimp too. Somebody needs to hold his feet to the fire. Caroline Glick has a great article. She's talking about Israel and the Trump area. The striking friendliness of the Trump election team is even more notable when we consider what Israel would have faced from a Hillary Clinton administration. Clinton's cabinet in waiting at the George Soros-funded and John Podesta-run Center for American Progress. Did you hear who is tied together there? Contained no serious advocates of the U.S.-Israel alliance. And she went on, it's a great article. You need to read it. Friday's Jerusalem Post. Look, we have major problems in the Middle East. These conflicts are going on. Once tolerant Mosul laments society's unraveling. They are finding mass graves with hundreds of people in them from Mosul. Now listen, ISIS took over Mosul easily because the people there were largely, my understanding is, Sunni and sympathetic. And ISIS has gone in and slaughtered them. Now there's reports this morning that Iraqi soldiers, the Shiite militias, are doing similar things. I will remind you of what Dennis Prager said on his show one day. He was on a bus going from Damascus to Amman, Jordan, I think it was. And he sat next to an Iraqi guy and he said, I don't know anything. He was like 22 years old. I don't know anything about the Iraqi people. Tell me about them. He said, we are the most brutal people on the planet. To a stranger on a bus. It's where the Assyrian Empire was centered. The atrocities of the Assyrian Empire are the stuff of historical legend. UN cites more killings, torture by the Islamic State, mass graves being found, with just like 100 kids, half of whom maybe or more were just beheaded. Kids like 8 to 12 years old, beheaded by these monsters. So it's a huge problem, and we need to pray for our president. This is what they face. This is a Iraqi army going into Mosul. And so this is in their car bomb attacks. And here's an actual film from the BBC of what happened.
They've been told IS operate in this area. Then this happens.
Five Iraqi soldiers were killed in that.
A large armed car packed with explosive drives.
And then people have the audacity to say the Middle East is less secure with Trump. From where I sit, not very secure anyway. And then there's Turkey now they're trying to get back pilots that they fired because of the failed coup. So it's so all the stuff, so while we can be excited and that type of thing, this would be the worst time in the world for the church to lose its focus. My wife shared something she saw the other day on Facebook about a pastor who met, I won't identify, with a bunch of pastors in his locality. And what did they say? I'll paraphrase it. We need to be more like Jen Hatmaker and cave in on the gay marriage issue and be kinder and more loving in what we say. And I believe the guy who said this. And so what needs to happen is, I pray that Mr. Trump will drain the swamp in Washington, and I pray that the church will drain the swamp in the evangelical church and make a stark break with these unfaithful shepherds who are really wolves. That is what needs to be the lesson going forward. Don't quit. This is not the time to take a vacation. We are, until the Lord returns, in the fight of our lives for the truth and the propagation of the gospel. And the biggest opposition to that is going to come from people that claim to be part of the church. Mark my words, it's going to happen. I read to you Ezekiel chapter 8 last week. Who was leading the false worship? The shepherds, the elders, 70 of them in Israel, in Jerusalem, in the temple, where, by the way, at the time, the Shekinah glory was there. And the wolves It didn't matter to them. So, bear down. That's what we need to do. Father, pray that you'll give us that strength, empower us with your Spirit, infuse us with your truth, the Word of God, and the power of the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ, who reaches out to sinners everywhere and saves them by faith in his finished work on the cross and his resurrection and his coming again. Bless us this week in Jesus' name. Amen.